to the Data Product Workshop. My name is Stuart Fotheringham. The subject of today's webinar is business storytelling with data products. So I'm just going to start off with our introduction and say thank you all for attending today and attending this webinar about business storytelling with data products, which of course is the practice of using data-driven tools and applications to craft and communicate compelling narratives about business performance, trends and opportunities. These data products, such as dashboards, reports and analytical platforms, transform complex data sets into understandable, engaging stories that inform decision-making and strategy. The primary problem that this approach solves is the gap between raw data and actionable insights. Business storytelling bridges that gap between business needs and data solutions. So I'm very glad to invite and introduce you all to an expert in this area, which is John Cook of 𝘕𝘂𝘀𝗶𝘀𝗀, and his talk today, which is business storytelling with data products.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Stuart. And thanks everyone for joining. As I say, we're sort of feeling our way through this a little bit. So apologies if it's a little bit rough. But let's kick off. So let me just share my screen. They're all coming through okay, hopefully. Okay, yeah. So thanks for joining. I know it's obviously quite late in the UK and you know, sort of mid afternoon there in the US and other places. So yeah, let's kick off. I think Stuart did a great introduction on that. And basically what we're going to be going through today is really kind of, as Stuart said, bridge that gap between kind of storytelling, data analysis, analytics, and business, and also technology as well a little bit. And the idea here is that we're trying to get over the big challenges in data and analytics, where we're trying to actually get to the business outcome. We're trying to deliver some analytics, some data work, that kind of stuff that actually delivers tangible business benefits, using what we call data products. We'll talk a little bit around that, but really trying to use those as a kind of language for the business, which allows business people to understand what we're doing, what's going to get delivered, how it matches their business insight or their business strategy, that type of stuff. And we're going to use it in a sort of storytelling kind of narrative type way. We have this process called the data product pyramid, which I'll go into quite depth. And the idea is we're building these narrative stories. What we're not going to probably going to cover in this particular episode is really going into sort of detailed UX, UI, visualization, how to do user experience across, you know, on screens, that sort of stuff. There's a whole piece around value and prioritization, how the use cases get into the funnel effectively, and also how you map business value from a business perspective. So this is more around going to be doing the actual narratives, building those stories, assuming we've got quite a clear business problem we want to solve. Now, why are we doing storytelling? Well, so again, as I said, it's really about trying to create this kind of actionable insight, something that's achievable that the business can do. And really what we should be doing is about changing the business. So it's either supporting it, driving it, adding new revenue streams, that type of stuff. And part of that is obviously I've done this a lot of times where you deliver some analytics and the business aren't sold on it. So part of it is actually selling the whole idea to the outcome to the business people, and also building these kind of composable analytics with what we call defensible analysis. So actually it's got a very clear path to how we came to the outcome. It's not just sort of a black box where we deliver some analytics, say, business, you need to do X, Y, and Z, but we can't really describe how we got there. And we use the story as the narrative. I mean, what we're trying to do is also challenging some of the belief systems we see in the businesses, which we see a lot. You know, here's what the data is actually telling us. Here's how we've got to that outcome, and trying to mitigate some of the classic asks we get from business teams. You know, just give me the data, or I know my business better. You know, the analytics are wrong, and the dreaded that we all know and love. Just build me a dashboard of some KPIs. So we're trying to actually get above that type of thing. So data products, massively hot topic in the industry, you all know this, but there's obviously some different definitions of them, and I won't describe that diagram on the right, but I think we all know what that means. So, but the way we talk about data products is really in a business context. You know, these are components that actually deliver business outcomes, solve business problems, and are end to end. So we can deliver something to a business person, they understand what the value is, what the insight that they deliver. Business don't care about taking data. They just want to care about how they get to their business initiative, their support, all that type of stuff. Product management process, we've got the word product in there, so really the product management process is key. That's much more important than trying to define what a product is or what it isn't. Trying to get that actual outcome through a kind of clear product management process, which is about value, about business customers, about use cases, about the market, that type of stuff. I mean, the TLDR is basically, we are describing data products as analytic components built specifically to meet customer needs. So rather than just the data sets, it's actually the analytics or the use case driven components. So as part of that language we talk, and we've done this quite a lot with many different organizations, is what we tend to do is use the data product nomenclature in that context of a business outcome or business problem. So, if a business person says, right, what's my historical performance? It's like, oh, well, that's a metric type data product. So that's something to measure what's happened in your business. Another one might be, what's my future demand? Oh, that's a forecast. So how do I avoid a risk? Using a simulation, what do I do next? A decision model. And also then we talk about, after that, is what data do I need and where do I get it? And we find actually this kind of language, this kind of nomenclature really resonates a lot with business people. If we just talk about the data, it can get quite, where's my outcome? Where's my business outcome? So we try and use language that actually defines what the business actually is asking for. Now to that, what an actual data product is, I've just said we're not going to define it, but actually I'm going to try and make a sort of definition for the context that we use it. So a data product now in our nomenclature is basically an analytics component, completely packaged analytics component that delivers some insight. So we've got, and that includes a visualization, that includes the model, whatever that is. It could be as simple as a metric, it could be a machine learning model, it could be an LLM, it could be anything. And the data configuration and any kind of API. So it's a packaged component that actually answers a particular part of the business problem, but it's something that's definitely business facing. So here we've got like two data products in one data set. So what the first data product is a historical metric with a nice bar graph on it. Another one is basically a forecast with a trend line on it as well. So this is what we're going to be talking about when we talk about products inside this webinar, and what we use when we do actually build out the analytics components. The core of this is something called the data product pyramid. I don't know if many of you have actually seen some of my content on LinkedIn, but we've been talking about this for about a year and a half. We've been using it on many organizations, and the idea is manyfold. But the key piece is being able to actually decompose a business ask, guide a business person through a particular objective. Been loads of times I've been in front of business people, and so they said, I want this kind of particular kind of very esoteric outcome. But actually, when you try and distill it down to something that's deliverable, something valuable, it's very, very, very difficult to do that. So what we try and do is use this data product pyramid and to guide a business person through those kind of steps. And the first thing we always do is, rather than, is ask them what they need to do. What's the outcome they want? What's the decision they need to make? What's the actual outcome, rather than, just give me the KPIs, just give me the data. It's trying to get into their head around what they're actually trying to achieve. And it also orientates them to be able to do that. We call those decision products. So fundamentally, if I want to be able to optimize my operations team and make it much more efficient, that's an outcome. So that's like a decision model around efficiency. Then we go down to the next level. So in order to get that outcome, what do you need to actually do that? And part of it is basically what's going to happen and why is it happen? And you're starting to build up basically the dependencies around trying to get to that point. So again, my operations use case, I need to make that team more efficient. So I need to understand what the demand's going to be. I need to understand what the historical capacity was. I need to understand what my future capacity is. And what these levels are doing are actually building these kind of forecasts and these extra kind of models or extra type of analytics above and beyond the data. So it's where things like machine learning and time series forecasting, all this sort of stuff. And also you're bringing in data across the whole organization. So you're joining data across. So, if I want to understand what my team performance is, I need to bring in like HR data. I need to bring in, the scheduling system. I need to understand the transaction flow, and I'm joining all that stuff together. And what we call these things knowledge products, because they're building above and beyond the pure data and the pure historical kind of history. And building on that, it's like, what's happened, what's my historical metrics, and that's where we call information products. And that's really kind of where a lot of analytics stops. I just give me my historical KPIs, my historical metrics, but actually, in order to do the forecasting, in order to get to the decisions, you need to understand what those inputs are. So we call those information products. And then underneath it, we've got like the data that actually that supplies basically all of those. And we build up this big dependency pyramid that allows us to guide the business around the outcome, but also to deliver these types of analytics. The process is basically, as I say, it's a business process, business change process. So what we try and do is we go to the business and ask these questions about what outcome do you want, and we form the business change driver. So, it could be we want to launch a new product, or we want to optimize this team, or we want to automate this process. And what we do then is basically get a big list of those kind of business initiatives, business questions. We then prioritize them, we select them, we implement a value framework, and we've got one around doing those. We won't be going through that today, but we have that today. We then frame it in terms of kind of the right articulation of the problem. So, the business might say, oh, we want to use a deep learning model or a neural network to do this. And so actually you just need a metric. So framing the actual problem ask is actually super, super important. And then basically once we've done that, once we've prioritized them, framed them, and then we need to discover them. We need to actually build them out. So what we do is we go through the process, which we'll go through in a second, to actually build those out. We discover the data. We discover the business problem, because the solution may change as you go through and discover the business problem. That's super important. Obviously, we know in analytics it's very exploratory, especially for doing kind of trying to find a new revenue stream or trying to find some value or some exploratory analysis. We try and we want to adjust the outcome, or not the vision, but the actual specific outcome based on our exploratory analysis. And then we basically, once we've delivered those, we then publish those out. And then the important bit is actually do the actual change bit. So this box here where it says 6 is actually the business change. Analytics is largely useless unless you're actually changing the business. So part of this whole process is actually working with the business to be able to actually give the insight to them, do the change. And once you've done the change, or once you're doing the change, you measure, and then you basically go back again. We'll talk a bit more around kind of that sort of loop. So we drill down that a little bit. So we have this decision framework basically that I talked about a minute ago. So fundamentally, if you think about the top, what are my key decisions? So again, that, as I said, that goes into a decision model, and we go down the sequence. We actually do it in reverse, which is kind of weird. So what we're doing is we're sketching out a sort of business process with analytics on a first go with a business person. So what do they think of the business is? So when we go through with the business person, what's your outcome? I want to optimize my team. Or that's a decision model. What do I need to make that decision? Oh, I need the future forecast capacity. That's a predictive model. That's potentially a forecast, and we need to join it across the organization. And then we say, why did it happen? What will happen? So we build metrics and we build data, and we're building this sort of journey almost in reverse. So we start with the outcome and then move all the way down, and we come up with this kind of sketch of what we think the business process actually is, and also what we need to actually deliver that. And so, it's rather than having a big business requirements document or trying to, capture it in some kind of long form way, this actually works really well. But of course, it's only a sketch. This is the problem. So how do we actually go from sketch to the actual the finished product fundamentally? And we use something called 𝘬𝘬𝘬𝘀, which is something a sort of a process came out of the US Air Force. Fundamentally, John Boyd, very famous Air Force kind of test pilot, I think it was the Korean War, observed that the opponent's aircraft were actually shooting down more of their aircraft, even though the US aircraft were much more highly spec'd. And he found it actually that the combatant aircraft had a faster joystick. So he came up with this kind of processing. Actually, the speed of decision and this constant iteration of actually making small measurements, adjusting, is actually the key for good dogfighting and good fighter pilot discipline. Now, obviously, we're not in war and that kind of stuff, but you can actually apply this into normal analytics fundamentally, and it's broken down into kind of 4 areas. You've got this kind of observe, like let's work out what's actually happening. Let's get the terrain. Let's just understand what's going on. Once we've measured what's going on, let's try and orient. Let's work out what it means to me. So, we've got my team they need to be more efficient. Let's work out what the ticket rates are. Let's work out, what the capacity is, or the capacity has been as a historical thing. And actually, then what do I need to do to actually make that more efficient? So that would be like the decision. So I map out what the various options for decisions, which would basically be things like optimize schedules fundamentally, and you get the right one. And then basically, once you've got the right decision, then you basically act and you basically implement the change. So in that case, it would be basically publish the schedule and then actually schedule the people implement the tickets and implement the operational processes. And then you go back again, this measure again. So, and the idea is you're going round and round, constantly adjusting, measuring, orienting, acting, and deciding, that type of stuff. And it works, as I say, this is very much a very analytic, experimental type of approach. So the first bit, as we say, the observe. So what we're actually doing is we're putting probes in the business process. So you think about, you've got your organization, and you've got data that's coming across all of that. So what we're doing is we're putting like little probes and measuring different bits of it around the different business process. And we're at the very start of it. So we bring in the data. We say, actually, we know what our outcome is. We want to optimize our team. Actually, let's measure exactly what's going on. So we put a probe in the ticket ratios. We took a probe in the capacity. We put a probe in the scheduling, the rostering, that type of stuff. And we're starting to build up this map of what's actually going on. Again, the observation way. And this is using analytics, reusable analytics, as part of this process. We then orient it. Once we've got that kind of map of what's going on, we start overlaying some more knowledge, what we talk on top of that. So, what's interesting is actually you are actually almost discovering the business process. You're mapping it out as effectively as a graph of analytics, and then you're overlaying on top. So, for instance, we're looking at for marketing, you're looking at customer churn rate versus the order delivery ratio. So you're kind of doing ratios, you're doing correlations, you're trying to bring much more meaning to actually what the map, the terrain actually was before, the historical kind of metrics. I think we've got a question, but I think we're going to probably leave. So we should have said this at the start, probably leave questions to the end, if that's okay. So yeah, thanks for that. And again, you say we're in this kind of knowledge area. We're trying to build on what we know about what's happening. We're trying to actually overlay what our business process and what our outcome is on top of that. And then we need to decide. So one of the things, example here, we've got we've seen what the capacity is. We know what the future capacity is going to be potentially. We know what how we join the rest of the organization. Let's work out a schedule. So here we've got a simple scenario engine. This is actually just doing stop price picker, which is obviously a very classic use case. And what we're trying to do here is actually work out kind of what the right path forward is. So this would be a model that does a scenario based engine. So if we increase the stock by 50%, what actually happens to the returns? So again, in our model of the operations team, we're like, let's play around with the team structure, the team sizes for different regions, and come up with an optimal schedule around that, so we can actually then get the maximum efficiency out there. So really kind of working out what the decision is around based on our two previous steps. And again, these are typically sort of simulations. These are typically interesting when LLMs come into this stuff. When you're talking about agents and stuff, this is something that they could potentially go and do. But you're also doing things like, in marketing campaign effectiveness, cohort analysis. You're doing, basically working out what, if we actually launch this product 6 months' time, is this segment of the market going to buy it, that sort of stuff. So you're trying to come out with a decision off the back of it. And obviously, once you have done, then you're into the change piece. So part of that is, you've made your decision, you've got your scenario, you said, right, this is what we're going to do. Here's when we're going to launch the product here, or we're going to have this particular optimization for this team piece, or we're going to adjust the price of our product to do this kind of thing. Then let's measure it. So this is really, really important. So once the business actually do the change, the business process, you work very closely with them, but then you start again plugging the probes in. Fundamentally, how are we measuring that change? Was our decision good? And this is something that's quite tricky to do, I think, in a lot of places. And then you're effectively back to the observed piece of it, fundamentally. So what does this actually look like? So this is actually an actual pyramid of one we've done before. And this is actually, again, coming back to that sort of staffing operations, a really simple use case. And the idea is this is a headless piece of analytics where effectively we are, doing the roster optimization. Again, I've tried to keep it quite simple. This obviously gets much more complicated than this. But as you see at the bottom, we have all our data from our state, so the e-commerce, the order management team, order management systems, sales, CRMs, etc. We have a bunch of metrics, which actually is measuring, obviously doing the observe piece. Ticket metrics, team metrics, customer operations, and we have also exec summary metrics, which is, we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide around how we kind of build up on this kind of pyramid of analytics. And they feed into like the knowledge products. We want projected capacity, which is potentially a time series, and we also capacity simulator. So we come up with a way of simulating the different schedules based on the forecast and that type of stuff. And that then feeds into a natural optimization engine, which then feeds the staffing system fundamentally. So we've broken the whole problem down into discrete composable analytics data products, which can be deployed independently, which is super important, reused across the organization as well. But also they can be changed independently. And one of the really interesting things about this process is that when we do the initial sketch, we don't know if it's feasible. We don't know if it's the right thing. It's the right approach. We don't even know it's the right view on the business process. When we actually go to build it, we start at the bottom. So we basically did, let's try and do the ticket metrics, for instance. So if we can't do the ticket metrics, the whole pyramid won't work fundamentally. So we haven't basically launched into a big program of analytics trying to do the top piece, the optimization engine. We've actually started small and started on the left-hand side with a metric. And as we go through, we build up each of these components. And as soon as we can't do one, then we have to basically take a stop, take a breath and go, right, now what do we do? Now we can't get that data, we can't get this. Can we change, can we actually do something different, or is the outcome not achievable? So again, part of this builder process is the kind of the feasibility around building these outcomes. But that was a headless kind of analytics. What about the user journey? This is about storytelling after all. So with the same pyramid, we can actually build a story telling solution for say the head of that ops team. Fundamentally, they come in. The ops lead comes in every morning, and she looks at her executive summary board. I know I'll probably get some comments about donut charts. I know they're quite emotive things, but it's more around the concept of of what's happening with their part of the business that's most important. So she looks at the exec summary. She's got 3 kind of key metrics on the top of that, and again, that comes on the exec summary metric: customer service operations, customer satisfaction, and customer value. Or customer service operations, that's red. What's going on there? So let's drill down into that. And again, what we're doing is we're drilling up the pyramid hierarchy. So the customer service operations is split into 4 other metrics, capacity, cost, that kind of stuff. All the capacity ones looking a bit dodgy. What's going on there? That's red. Let's drill down into that. Let's look at ticket types by team. Again, we're navigating through this sort of journey down to the lower levels of the metrics. So we're actually doing kind of reversing down the pyramid effectively. The ticket type by team looks fine. And there's an issue, right? So one of the issues, one of the typical types of tickets is actually being raised a lot, and it actually spiked. What's going on there? Oh, actually, I know that's those tickets are actually for a particular system. Is that system's down, and that system's based in one of our regions, right? We need extra capacity to manage those extra tickets. Let's come up with a what if simulation around, say, so we put like 4 more people in that region to actually cope with those tickets. Is that going to work? Or we don't have 4 people, so we have to put 2 people from a different region. Is that going to work? So we come up with scenarios and actually say, let's repurpose the people around that using the capacity simulator. Right, we come up with a new schedule. Brilliant. Let's actually then put that into the optimization engine, and then let's publish that out into the staffing system. So we can actually have people interacting with these kind of journeys, as well as the sort of the headless type analytics in there as well. So part of this whole piece is this. I talk about composability a lot, and fundamentally, what we're trying to do is actually break apart the business process and actually then put analytics into different pieces of the business process and then recompose them. So fundamentally, your dashboard or your visualization of whatever is accessing these different components individually. So I can actually reconfigure them, reformat them. I can also iterate on them. So if one metric is gets out of date, or the different way of calculating, we can plug it in and do and all the consumers of that get a new version of it instantly, so we don't have to go and digging dashboards and that type of stuff. We're trying to build, let's say, these kind of stories. We're also trying to ask complex questions. So rather than just the KPIs, we're trying to get some really sophisticated kind of decisioning into the business. And we're also building out this ecosystem of reusable components. So imagine you've got your sales forecast metric. You're not having sales, marketing, and finance and CEO all arguing over it, because actually it's the same metric that everyone's using. So there's definitely an architectural component to this. I won't cover that today. That'll be in a different webinar. But we're trying to build this kind of this composable enterprise. And also we're trying to go up the decision-making curve, right? Funding value. Now we all know, like, just give me the KPIs, just give me my historical metrics. We're trying to actually go up that curve so we can actually start doing much more sophisticated analytics and not having to reinvent the wheel each time. And we're using this kind of process and this kind of the corresponding architecture that goes along with it to do that. But again, we've talked a lot about composability. We've talked a lot about journey maps. We haven't really talked about storytelling at all. And so what we're trying to do with this process is actually then turn it into proper stories. And I don't know if you've come across something called Freytag's pyramid. It's a very common process of a view on how stories are created. And we know there's only 7 stories, but he's a German playwright, I think he was, and he basically broke a story, a good story, up into 6 different sections. The exposition, which is setting the scene, inciting incident, which is basically what kicks it off. Where's the conflict which you have in the story, which you need to have in the story to make a story interesting. You have this thing called a rising action, which builds the tension up to the climax, which is the peak conflict, and then the turning point is basically, the hero is they've come to this massive problem. What are they going to do about it? And then the falling action is basically what they do about it, and then the resolution is the conclusion, which is basically the tying up loose ends, the final state, the closure piece of it for the reader. Now, obviously, this is very for traditional storytelling, but we can actually take a view around this for analytics. So I've come up with something called the data story pyramid, and it's very similar. There's quite a few people out there doing this kind of thing, so it's not really that fringe and that novel. So it's well-tested process, and we've changed it slightly. So we've got things called the trigger event. We start with the trigger event, which is basically, it could be someone asking you for some analysis. It could be a business problem we talked about earlier, or it could be a business initiatives. So something is going to trigger the key request. We then basically do observe what happens, use the 𝘂𝘪 type process, work out what's happened. We then, once we've worked out what's going on, we have the light bulb moment, which is basically the climax. Effectively, in the previous one, we discover what the actual problem. We discover what's going on, what it means to us. We then decide what we want to do, and then we act with measurement. And the measurement is really, really important, because obviously back in the storytelling, you sort of stop at the end of the story, whereas here we're in continuous measurement, continuous iteration, which is super important. I mean, even if you're doing one-off analysis, what you want to be able to do with all that analysis that you've put together, you don't want to be completely throw away. You want to be able to reuse parts of it, if not all of it, or if you want to go back to it, it's not going to take you, the same time again. So we're in this constant kind of narrative storytelling, but we're in this iteration in there as well. So what does this actually look like? So I've come up with a story. This is actually a business use case we've encountered quite a lot, actually, interesting enough. This is a story about Jane, who actually runs the e-commerce platform in a particular organization. And she's been told by sales and by the line of business lead that the monthly order value has been dropping lately. It's been going down and down and down, and no one has a clue why. Obviously, there's revenues going down, sales are going down. We have no clue what's happening. So she's now been charged with actually working out what's going on. So again, if we take the 𝘂𝘪 and the storytelling narrative approach, we start putting probes into the business process. So let's first have a look at the cart abandonment rate, right? So on the e-commerce solution system, people get in your shopping cart. How many of these carts are actually being abandoned? Oh, they're really high. So what do we do now? So how many have actually then, let's look at the actual orders. How many orders have gone through, and how many orders have actually been returned? Well, that's not quite so high. So actually, it's not about them buying, actually buying and returning orders. It's actually not actually buying orders in the first place. What about late orders? What about, is that a key thing? It's like, no, again, that's quite low. So that's a bit weird. So this is definitely about people pre-purchase rather than post-purchase. So let's start doing a correlation between the two. So you see the bottom level with building up those information products, those metrics. The top one, then basically we start doing correlations between them, and the ratio is actually quite low, because actually it's about, what we're seeing is the orders aren't being placed actually rather than being returned, but we are investigating exactly what's going on by using 𝘂𝘪 and by using these data products piece. So the next thing to be able to look at is, let's have a look at what orders are being shipped. Actually, the unsuccessful order shipping, that's super high. What's going on there? So And the on-time shipping rate, that's really low as well. What's going on there? So let's do a correlation between orders and suppliers and see what's actually happening. So we're into the knowledge product world. So we're actually looking at across our business and actually understanding what's actually happening, trying to make sense of it. And that's kind of why we're in this kind of knowledge-based world. We got the aha moment. They've got one supplier that's late 50% of the time. So basically what's happening is people are placing orders and they're not getting shipped and they're basically cancelling. That's absolutely no good. But we've discovered what the actual problem is. But we've also got this ecosystem of composable analytics. We've broken the problem down. We've observed. We've done the orient piece. We just don't know. We just haven't decided what to do now. So fundamentally, what are our options? So this supply is not good. But then we've got a number of options. We can go and call up the supply and find them. We can basically sue them. We can do all that kind of stuff, or we can actually do something a bit more clever. That's what happens if we want to swap that supplier out. So let's try and go into our decision product space and actually model out what a new supplier actually for those particular products would look like. Now we obviously take data in for the rest of the organization. We take things like the order history, and we will then need to model all the kind of metrics and the data for a new supplier. We can go out and model, actually ask for new suppliers to give information out of that, or we can just model theoretical suppliers, seeing what we want to do. But then we basically build a analysis model around that. And this is the decide act piece. So we build an analysis model around the new supplier. We bring all the data in, we scenario it, and basically say, actually, the outcome is, yes, we actually can put in a new supplier. There are a number in the market. They can do we have got the SLAs, who can provide the inventory, who can do all that kind of stuff. Right, let's go to the change team, which is will probably affect quite a lot of the whole business process. So there'll be your inventory team, there'll be logistics, there'll be warehouse, that type of stuff. So we're going to bring on potentially a new supplier, so a load of onboarding, finance, a load of piece around that. So let's instigate that change program to actually bring on a new supplier, but then let's also measure what's going on. So again, part of this is not a fire and forget, here's the analytics, but actually here's the actual the recommendation, but actually this is how we're going to measure it. Let's prove it out, because we actually get halfway through this process and it doesn't yield the type of things that the SLAs are broken, the inventory isn't there. We need to then go back into the solution, into this kind of process and say, right, well, this supply didn't work, let's go to another one, or let's try something else. So again, the whole point is you're trying to measure, you're trying to test, you're trying to pivot as much as you can. Obviously, supply chain is not a millisecond business, so can be quite tricky to do that. But actually, what we're trying to do is get that kind of repeatable. And as soon as we find a problem, we can deal with it. We don't want to wait 6 to 12 months before we see that kind of thing. Okay. So in summary, how are we doing with time? A bit ahead of schedule. In summary, the first point is basically having as robust for getting the key business outcome. Business outcomes got to be the top of mind. The next piece is basically using these data products as analytic components. Rather than just thinking about the data, thinking about kind of the plumbing and the foundation stuff. How can we actually use analytics to drive full business outcomes? And the third one is basically how we build this kind of full narrative around, using data products, storytelling, because what we want to be able to do is basically say, right, we've got this new supplier recommendation, and the business go, well, hang on, that's going to cost a fortune. It's like, it's not going to cost a fortune, because actually, if you look at a 4-year projection of the supplier with a 50% orders loss, we're actually going to be making more money around that. So it's building that kind of this defensive narrative, this defensive storytelling piece, but actually building it as you go, rather than coming up with design, trying to figure out if it's right or not, and then spending 6 to 12 months working out if it's going to work or not. You're building this kind of iterative narrative, but then with a complete defensible story around it. Okay. Right. Again, I think a little ahead of time. Are there any questions? Do we have any questions in the panel, Stuart?
Yeah, thank you, John. I think that was an excellent coverage of the entire process from the beginning to the end. We do have one question so far, and we would certainly like some others if anyone wants to ask them. It's from KK. It says, do you guys have life sciences SME?
Subject matter expertise, I'm guessing that is. So
I'm
yes,
guessing that is true. Yeah.
yes. So we have done projects in life sciences. A number of those. We're working with we've worked with clinical trials companies and also with some pharmaceuticals. And we have people who are who are experts in life sciences and data science in there as well. So yes, that is that's a definite yes. Okay, another great question. There's only an area full technical professionals without this macro view you presented. How do you deal with them? You taught these views or what? No worries. Yeah, so this is exactly right. This whole process has come out of exactly that, one of those challenges. Working with it, and it's not just the technical; it's on the business side as well. So you've got to remember, getting business people to describe what they want to do and their requirements is extremely tricky, right? So you've got one side the business people who struggle sometimes to articulate their requirements, and then on the other side you've got very technical people who basically are great at building data platforms and data engineering and this kind of stuff, and and data governance. They're all super experts. This bridges the gap. The whole point around this is trying to bridge that gap, and I do this a lot with organizations. Actually sit in between the business people and the technical people, and we get both of them in a room. We did a piece a few months ago where I sat in the room with the CTO, the head of data science, the CEO, COO, and the head of product. It was like all three of us, all like three groups of people, and we walked through this kind of process, and we came out the back of it all with the same understanding. So this is exactly the idea, to bring those people together, because we can talk about. And again, the taxonomy, the language is super important. We can't talk about data products being data sets to the tech team and then talk about that to the product and business team, because they won't get it. So what we're trying to do is bridge that gap. And part of it is about training, and part of it is about taking people through this actual process with use cases, trying stuff out and the idea is you get the business and the tech teams and data teams together doing it in a room, in workshops and this kind of stuff. And actually we've done this a number of times, and the clouds part, and the technical people do come towards the business, and the business people do come towards the technical people. So it does work.
I think part of this question, there was two other questions here in the same part of that question, which was, how do we deal with the technical professionals without this view, as I think you've covered. The question asks, have you taught these views? Do we teach the views? So I guess, do we have any training around this that we can offer to people?
We haven't so far, but that's definitely something we open to talking to. I mean, I've presented this a lot in different organizations as part of delivery engagements. We haven't done it specific training, but it's definitely something we can look at. We'd certainly be open to that.
Let's move on to the next question from Anupam. Is this approach similar to a 𝘗𝘂𝘀𝗶 pyramid?
Yeah, this is so yes, it's interesting. All these types of things, the 𝘗𝘂𝘀𝗶 one is very similar. So it's the hierarchy of needs, and it's actually all following very similar kind of psychology fundamentally. So what we're trying to do, you look at the kind of what's the most valuable thing and break that down to get to the least valuable thing. So yeah, it is similar. It's very specific. So this is actually around part of what we're trying to do is get past just the requirements, actually deliver the actual outcome. So the idea is that we're not just breaking down the business requirement, we're deploying components as part of that. So we come out of a one-day workshop, which we've done before, with some example data products based on the business outcome. We go and then build them. So the idea is we're trying to get to that delivery and experimentation and actually build stuff very, very quickly and pivot around it. But yes, it is similar to that.
So Patrick asks, can you describe your typical engagement with a client in terms of time span?
So that's a great question. So it varies. So depending on which phase of the process we do. Typically, these are short engagements. So ranging from a day to sometimes 2 or 3, 4 weeks, sometimes 3 months. There's that type of level of engagement. The 3 months tend to be very very sophisticated ones, and they tend to be, so the design process is designed to be very very short and agile, so we can iterate around quite a bit fundamentally. So yeah, it's normally sort of a few weeks worth of work. Ranging from 2 to 6 to 8 weeks, something like that typically. depending on the business problem and depending on the organization.
The next question is, do you see regulatory reporting challenges can be solved with data products?
That's a great question. Yeah, we had literally had a conversation, a LinkedIn thread. I think it was on Monday, and someone's actually sort of talked about. I can't remember the guy's name. Was talking about data products is for regulatory thing. Absolutely is the short answer to that. So I did a lot of work in investment banking during the just after the crash, and 2009 to 2017, did a lot of regulatory stuff, and the metrics and decomposing stuff was actually really important around that. So a regulatory use case is a classic use case for this type of thing. So your business outcome is basically, we need to do regulatory reporting around our capital allocation or our transaction reporting, this type of whatever it is. Those are exactly you can feed those into the funnel, and actually then break them down. So and it's always breaking down the risk metrics or types of metrics that you're reporting on. Think about ESG and sustainability. That's basically looking at carbon. You're looking at sustainability. You're looking at a lot of different metrics across. So and it's perfectly designed to actually to solve those kind of challenges. So yes, definitely.
Excellent. The next question is from Kieran, and he asks, does Dataception provide training to citizen data product managers?
That's sort of variation on the previous question. So I said we haven't to date. So we're not formal training. We have done projects where people have basically trained as part of the almost on the job type stuff, but we haven't offered any formal training as of yet. But again, it's something we can definitely open to doing. And the idea is this is about citizen. This is not about being a really highly specialized, it's common sense, a lot of it. It's about, like just asking the right amount of right questions, I always say, and getting people just sort of into the sort of product management mindset without going a full product management kind of, 20 years of history, of course, that type of stuff. So yeah, it's very much that aimed at that piece. But yeah, like I said, we haven't offered it yet, but that's something we could definitely be open to.
The next question is for Dharma, and Dharma asks, what role do the CDO, CDAO, and their data teams play in this? Is your data product approach dependent on a data foundation created or managed by a data team?
Well, that's two fantastic questions. So, sorry, can we get that one back? So I can try to read it again.
I'll ask it as two different questions.
Oh, go on then.
I think because they're both good. They're both good questions, so we'll split it in two. So thank you, Dharma. What role do you think the CDO, CDAO, and their data teams play in this?
So it's a great question. So this process or this approach is really designed to be organization agnostic, fundamentally. So the CDO, and CDAO teams, if they are delivering customer-facing analytics, they can implement this. Fundamentally, the idea is that you can have data product managers in the business teams and data scientists and analytics people in the business teams, or you could have them in the central teams. As long as they're business facing, you can actually be able to ask those questions of business people. It becomes less about the org chart. It becomes more around the process. Now, obviously, there are organizational charts which make it a bit more complex to do than others, and there's a delivery model which we're putting together around how you do that. But fundamentally, if your CDAO organization is building customer facing or business facing analytics, they absolutely can be to almost turn them into consultants, data product consultants, and actually deliver this kind of piece through that. Yeah.
So the second part of the question was, is your data product approach dependent on a data foundation created or managed by a data team?
Well, there's two parts to that. So yes, the part of this is this ability to create these analytic components like quickly and easily, right? So and there needs to be some infrastructure to be able to do that. Ideally you have infrastructure that's used that has similar processes and used, it's very data mesh, where you have your different teams are deploying like a metric and that kind of stuff, and they're all deployed in a similar way, and they've got similar information models, all that sort of stuff. But again, ideally it's not bound to who actually builds that platform. If it's a central platform that has a multi-tenant capability and it's done by the data team, absolutely fine. That absolutely works, and the business teams or whoever's actually delivering the analytics can actually build on top of those on top of that infrastructure. Yeah, that's really the key. It's whatever infrastructure implements this process. Now, if that's a central team doing that, you know, the way I think of it is like, you know, with the cloud, you know, public cloud, you've got, you know, the cloud provider teams delivering services, and then their customers, the business, wire up those services. So as long as you've got that kind of model going on, you can have a central team delivering that the platform. Absolutely.
Excellent. Thanks for answering that so comprehensively. Last few questions. Do you, anonymous attendee again, do you use metrics trees? If so, will it be the same metric tree for all data products?
So this is another great question. So it's interesting. In 2014, I built a metric tree solution for a large international bank, and we had like 3,500 metrics, all dependent on this. The data product pyramid has grown out of that. So you think about the pyramid of dependent analytics is effectively a metric tree on steroids. So part of those nodes on that tree, and tree is basically like obviously a tangent graph, but what those nodes can be metrics, but they could also be something else on top of it as well. So it could be a machine learning model, it could be a forecast, time series model, that kind of stuff. So we actually, it's a data product tree or a pyramid, depending which paradigm you want to use. But fundamentally, they're all building on the top of each other. So the pyramid is composed of metric, which will have small little metric trees in it, but it will have it's a tree of analytics fundamentally. Some of them will be metrics, and some of them won't be. And it's more around which data product solves which business problems. So what you could have is effectively 3 or 4 different business problems which have kind of virtual trees or pyramids, but they actually reuse the same thing. So fundamentally, if you get that, like the roster, automation engine, you could also have one around the finance looking at the costs, and that could have another pyramid, but reuses a lot of the products which are in the roster optimization engine fundamentally. But it's actually a logically different pyramid fundamentally. So what you're trying to do is, when for a completely different problem, if it reuses a lot of the same analytics to actually come up with it, you're trying to reuse those on those. So effectively, you end up with this kind of, let's say, what we call the composable enterprise, which is basically a bunch of analytics components spread across your business process, being reused for different and reconfigured for different problems, fundamentally. Hope that makes sense.
I think it does.
Cool.
Now, but I would. Now this is a question close to my heart, actually. So thank you, Steve Fisher, for asking it.
Hey, Steve, how you doing?
Do you run into issues with basic data quality and management? Does your approach help in this regard?
That's another great question. So thanks, Steve. Yeah. So what's really interesting is if you start, and again, there's an architectural element to this. So, the packaging of the data product, where you have data that's associated with that particular piece of analytics. Again, we'll do another webinar on the architecture, kind of how we do that. But actually, interesting enough, if you take that approach and you compose these kind of packaged up analytics with their own data, the data quality rules go along with them fundamentally. So actually, data quality management gets simpler in a lot of ways, because what you're doing is providing the data quality for those particular analytics. So you're not trying to define data quality rules across the whole organization. You're doing it for specific use cases, and that also means you can have data quality rules which conflict. So if I've got a data set that's being used for 2 different products, for instance. So for instance, I got this is an actual use case from one of our customers. They've got 4 million customers. Some of them are in our senior citizens, and they've been with them for 50 years. They didn't have a date of birth when they signed on, fundamentally, so marketing can't segment them, that kind of stuff. But the business process to actually service them actually runs fine without date of birth for these people. Now, is that a data quality rule error? It isn't for the main business process, but it is for marketing. So marketing can then basically build an analytics component for their piece, add their own data quality rules saying, if it is date of birth there or not. But then the analytics for the main business process can completely ignore it. So actually, in a lot of ways, it simplifies the whole thing. You get a lot more data quality rules because they are specific, but they're built with the business process. So yeah, it can actually simplify in a lot of ways.
I think that covers that very well, John.
No worries.
Nebel asks the question: is storytelling applicable across various academic fields and sciences, particularly in the context of reporting research processes, methodologies, and conclusions?
Wow, that's we could probably spend a whole session on that.
I think so.
Uh,
That's a
yeah.
big question.
I mean, the TLDR is yes, obviously. Anytime you want to take people on to an outcome, you want to take people along that journey, then storytelling is applicable. And that's whether you're publishing an academic paper, or you're reporting to a regulator, or you're trying to instigate some change, or you're building a business case for a new initiative in an organization. Storytelling is ubiquitous, and it's not used enough. There's quite a lot of people out there. Christopher Chen talks about this. There's a load of people on LinkedIn and stuff who are really good on the visualization side of it. Storytelling is hard. It's hard because you have to come up with the narrative, you have to do the work, you have to, and it also shakes a lot of belief systems, as we talked about. So it is super important, but there are some challenges with it. Obviously, if you come up with a very clear, defined story, but it goes against someone's belief system, especially if they're a senior person in an organization. We've all been there. It can actually cause quite a bit of friction. But I mean, the short answer is absolutely. Obviously, if you're in that kind of context, storytelling is great. But obviously, if you're building an application, and you just want to be able to get like the headless version of the optimization engine, you just want to deliver that. You don't necessarily need the whole storytelling art, but if you want to actually show what's happening, and actually if you're making analytics decisions, especially, obviously LLMs is a really interesting one now about how you make a decision with, with the vectors inside an LLM. You want to be able to tell the story on how you've actually made that decision. So it is applicable, just in the right context.
Nathalia asks, I've been reading about data translator, which sounds a lot like what you've presented. Do you know this role? Is there a more fundamental difference?
Yeah, no, it's a great one. I actually did a piece for at Penguin Random House a few months ago around the translator role, and a lot of the same content. And it comes from the same space. Fundamentally, it's about, part of this is about translating the business into analytics requirements. Part of it's about delivering, getting very quick to delivery. Part of it's about feasibility. But that translation piece is something that's, I've been in this industry 30 years. It's one of the biggest problems. Trying to understand what the business is doing from a data and tech person, but also get the business to articulate in a way that can be delivered and iterated around is really, really difficult. So that translator piece is exactly right. It's a major part of this. So no, there isn't a fundamental difference. It's the same thing.
Penultimate question today, which is, how would you reframe this for a non-profit organization environment?
That's a really good question. I'd have to think about it. I mean, I can't think anything off the top of my head that would be fundamentally different. Now, obviously, non-profits, there tend to be a more collegial environment. You tend to be much more price sensitive, and around the value frameworks and stuff tend to be kind of different. But I wouldn't fundamentally reframe it. I'd love to deep down drill down on that a bit more. If they're really, obviously non-profits are run differently than private companies and listed companies and that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, the process is designed to be kind of ubiquitous across anything. If you're basically trying to build and iterate through customer facing or business facing analytics, then this should be absolutely applicable. And we've used it across sectors. We've used it across different companies, different size companies, big and small. It tends to be yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a cost. It's basically it's a cost and risk story as well in there as well. So it's you're trying to de-risk stuff as well. You're trying to break the problem down and then only implement a small piece of it, the bits that you need you can implement it. And if you can't do the whole thing, as I said before, then you don't want to spend 10 million and 12 months before you find that out. So there's definitely a cost, an efficiency, and a risk piece to it as well, and this adaptability to be able to adapt and react to what's happening. Because how many times we've done something that's taken 12 months and the business has completely changed, especially at the moment, right? So we need to be able to adapt and change and reconfigure as we go. Great question.
The final question of the day.
Yeah.
And we're just about on time for our schedule, so extremely well done for the first one, John. I think. Cool. Is it possible to apply data product pyramid on top of any data architecture implemented in the organization? Data fabric, data mesh, central data hub.
So it actually sits, a good question. I'm surprised it didn't come up earlier. So it actually sits above those, but fundamentally the key thing in all those is being able to build these composable analytics fundamentally. Now, there are some which obviously the mesh gears itself towards that, like day one. Data fabrics is about bringing in, and joining lots of different data across an organization. So, and also automating and all that kind of stuff. So if you can actually use the fabric, and we actually use a fabric in as part of our platform, our data product platform, as that data layer to actually surface those data sets to each of the products. But then can you package them and then deliver them as we talked about? Then yeah, absolutely. What we don't want to, it's quite different. So if you were going to take a data warehouse or a data lake approach to actually build the analytics, that would struggle a bit. But you can actually take data obviously from data warehouses, but actually that would be a bit more challenging around that. Central data hub, obviously that tends to be at the data level. So we tend to be, the pyramid's actually trying to go above that. So if you had a central analytics hub, which is a very similar thing, then yeah, absolutely, you should be able to do that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. I think that was a great session. I agree with the feedback we've got there. I just wanted to end up saying thank you to everyone who attended today and watched our inaugural, very first, very rough around the edges data product workshop. Some of you asked fascinating questions. We'd love to have follow-up one-on-ones with anyone who's interested. Reach out, get in touch. We are happy to talk to anyone and answer any questions. So please do that. And I just wanted to finish up by saying we will have a video of this and the PDF of the slides and a transcript as soon as we can get all that stuff together. And we'll imminently be announcing what webinar number 2 is going to be about. So thank you very much for everyone for attending.
Yeah, thank you for attending. It was great questions, and thank you for hosting, Stuart. That's been a great emceeing.